Hi, PaolaJo from SederQuilts. When we are quilting, we don't lock stitch our starts and ends very often because you're going to sew a strip set together and then you cut it, and so there's no locking stitch after you cut your parts and pieces. But one of the frustrations when you are later on in the quilt is that some of these little intersections and seams where there's no locking stitch, some of these pull open. So because I know that that can happen when I am stitching, one of the things I do is I really try to figure in some forgiveness, and I try to protect these seams. Instead of having this open and pinning it, well, there's a lot of reasons I don't use pins, but I try to keep this intersection, whoa! I try to keep this intersection protected as well as possible with a clip-it instead of a pin. And I'm going to keep that covered. I'm going to stitch as close as I can till I get pretty close to the clip-it. And anytime I'm adjusting the fabric, this is protected. When I get close, then I'm going to remove the clip-it and I'm going to stitch through the intersection before I adjust things again. I'm going to stitch carefully and get through that intersection before I move and adjust things again. And then that way, this doesn't pull open. Because, oh my goodness, if you're not careful and we just leave that unprotected and hanging out there while we're stitching, oftentimes we'll pull that just a little bit and some of those threads will open up and then you get an open seam. And oh my goodness, there's nothing worse on a long arm than quilting along and all of a sudden your hopping foot gets caught in an open little spot. So use a clip-it and protect that seam and don't stretch it until after you've stitched through it. I'm undoing a couple of blocks and I just wanted to show you a real quick hint. First of all, if you put all your little extra threads on your t-shirt, then they don't get on everything else. If I'm at my long arm, I actually use a little piece of batting and try to grab everything into the batting so that it doesn't get everywhere. But I'm putting a clip-it right on the seam so that that is protected. Every time you unstitch a seam and you pull things apart, there is the possibility that you're going to unstitch a little bit of this seam. And oh my goodness, when we get over to the long arm and we're quilting things, once in a while we have some open seams. And I think a lot of them happen when something is unstitched. So when I get close to where the seam is, I'm going to unstitch on either side of it so that there's less tension there. I'm going to put this clip-it back on the seam again so that is well protected. I'm going to keep unstitching, about every 3/4 of an inch or so here. If you go an inch at a time, there's just a little bit too much space and it's going to pull a little bit. And when you have to pull a little bit to get it out of there, it's going to make that seam a little bit stretched and wonky, and it causes a little more damage. So anytime I can make things happen just a little bit easier with less disturbance, I think it's better. So once I have, about every 3/4 of an inch, I go to the other side and I find a spot where it's already loose from the back side, and sometimes you have to try a little bit. But once I find a spot here, I'm going to just lift that a bit. And then we're going to move this out of the way a little bit for a moment. We're going to carefully get across that seam. I'm going to put that back on there to protect that and finish pulling it out. And then we're going to just lift out all those little odds and ends. And I really do try to remove all those little threads before I sew things back together again. Otherwise, you have to pick them out later. And it's easier to pick them out now than after things are stitched back together again and pull on the wrong little thread a little too hard. So anyway, yeah, about 3/4 of an inch. Use a clip-it to protect your crossways seams, and yeah, I really love those clip-its. I do sell those in my store, so at SederQuilts.com you can buy some clip-its, and I do have a class on this gorgeous quilt, so check it all out. See you later. Toodaloo.